An Excel pivot table is a very powerful tool that calculates, summarizes, and organizes your data so you can see patterns and trends. This video will explain how to create a pivot table. Let's get started by taking a look at our information. Here we have a list of sales transactions. It's relatively large. There's over 800 rows of data. I'm just going to go down to the bottom so you can see, and then back up to the top. It's great information. Each row is a sales transaction, and it lists things like the category, the product style, sales rep, region, etc. And perhaps it is our job to analyze and see, for example, which region or rep does the best. Or maybe we need to calculate totals for categories or product styles. Well, we can do all that and more with a pivot table. All you need to do is click inside of the list, head over to the Insert tab of the ribbon, and click on Pivot Table. Confirm the range that the data exists in, and just let it know where you would like that pivot table to go. I want to put it in a new worksheet. So all of that is as should be. I just click on OK. And here we have the shell of our pivot table. The pivot table will begin to take shape over here in the spreadsheet itself, and in the task pane on the right I have the tools that help me build it. So we're going to see a list of the fields from the data itself and the quadrants where we can place them. So all we need to do is drag and drop the fields into the positions down below. So getting back to perhaps analyzing this by salesperson, I can take the sales rep field and drag it into one of these quadrants, for example, rows. It lists all the individual or unique salespeople from my list. Then if I'm looking to see, total transactions, etc., I can take one of these numeric fields, for example, total, and drag it and drop it into the last quadrant. It's the values quadrant, and the default calculation it will perform there is the sum. So here I have, for example, without having to do a single calculation, it tells me the total sales for each of those salespeople. Now, if that formatting is throwing you a little bit, I'll just take a minute to select those totals, and back on the Home tab of the ribbon, I'm just going to go ahead and format that to look like dollars. Just clean it up a little bit, too many decimal points, and just maybe a better format to see what's going on here. Okay, so there we have it again. Didn't have to do any calculations, just dragged and dropped some fields around in this task pane, and I can see the total sales by salesperson, and then also across the board the grand total of sales. You can introduce other fields as well. So for example, if I was also interested in seeing how things are working out regionally, I can take that region field and drop it into one of the other quadrants, for example, columns, and that will place each of the regions in column format there, sort of building out my pivot table. And again, you get the totals. So I get, for example, the salesperson and region total. I get grand totals per salesperson, and I get grand totals per region along the bottom. So those are all very helpful in sort of analyzing this. If you want to see it sort of embedded, you can go ahead and do that. I can take region and drag it and drop it into rows, and that will show me salesperson and region. If you wanted to see it a different way, maybe just take that region field and drag it and drop it above sales rep, still remaining in that rows quadrant, and then I can see it by region and then salesperson. So you can see really the options are sort of endless, and it just helps you once again maybe answer some questions about your data and see things along those lines. So just dragged and dropped sales rep into columns. Maybe that's not the look or hope or information I was looking for. I'll just drag that back. Okay. There's one other quadrant to mention. It's called filters. So if you wanted to, you can place a field into the filter quadrant. So I'm going to take shirt style and drag it and drop it there. And just so you, what the filter quadrant does is it adds a top level filter to your information. So right now we're seeing all the shirt styles or product styles here, and that's what's contributing to these totals that are displayed here. If you use the drop down, you'll be able to say, you know what, I just want to see what we're doing with dress shirts, right? So I can select that, Just give that a click and click on OK. And it pivots or filters this information so that we can see, for example, the totals for just that product. I can see that there is not a lot of dress shirt sales by some of our salespersons in the Northwest region. So just things like that are helpful to reveal. These are the kinds of things that you might reveal through the use of your pivot tables. Okay, we're just going to flip this back to showing all of the data. Just giving that a click, selecting all, and clicking OK. And like we mentioned earlier, the information in here, the numeric information, is summarized as totals, and that's the default. If you want some other calculation, for example, an average, you can do that. Just come over here, click on that total button, and go into value field settings. And you can select, for example, one of the other available functions. I'm going to choose average and click on OK. And now what we're looking at are the average sales by salesperson, by region. And there we go. Flip that back. Just again, giving that a click, value field settings, setting that back to sum. And that's how you can change the kind of calculation it's displaying. Let's see, for example, we're finished analyzing this by sales rep and want to explore a couple of other sort of angles here. So if I no longer need sales rep, I can just deselect it and it will remove that from the pivot table, and then just sort of, rearrange this, bringing down the fields that I am focused on. So I'm going to do category, shirt style, and I'm going to leave region there. I'm also going to leave this as total. So again, just rearrange your pivot table by deselecting, selecting, dragging and dropping, all of those things till you get what you need out of your pivot table and you can see what you're hoping to see and help you analyze. So this pivot table that we've created is based on the original data. And unlike most things in Excel, the pivot table is not going to update on its own. So let's take a look at a few ways that we can do this. First, I just want to zoom in a little bit so we can see our information a little bit more closely. Okay, and we can see from this schedule here, from this pivot table, that there are no men's polo shirts in the Northwest. There is a big blank spot there. So just want to go into the data, make a men's polo Northwest sale, and show you that the pivot table, again, does not update on its own. So the original data is over here on a separate tab. And I just want to, for example, find a men's polo and make this Northwest. Okay, and maybe we'll up this amount so that there is a larger sort of sale there. Okay, so I should now have a men's polo in the Northwest that totals $527. Let's look at our pivot table. It's over here on sheet 2. And that is not the case. I do not have any sales there in my men's polo Northwest. That's because, once again, you've got to update that pivot table manually. There's two ways to do that. You can right-click any cell or any area in your pivot table, and on that shortcut menu, just choose refresh, and you'll see it come through. And then also, you've got these contextual tabs on your ribbon. On the Analyze tab, there is also a refresh button. So either of those options will help you to refresh that pivot table if the data changes. So remember to keep that in mind. And you can easily change the look of your pivot table by applying formatting. Just make sure you're inside the pivot table, click on any cell, go into the Design tab underneath your pivot table tools. Those are the contextual tabs that you get while you're in your pivot table. Here's the gallery. There's pivot table styles. You'll just use the drop down to be able to pick something off of the list. You can hover over something and it'll show you what it will look like. And to actually apply it, you just give it a click. And then you can also change that at any point. Easy enough to do, and it looks great. And that's it for today's pivot table session. We'll see you again soon.